Hello, this is Vivica Williams and welcome to UATV Head to Head. Even countries such as the Baltic states and Turkey, NATO members, are concerned that NATO will not protect them against possible attacks by Russia. And Ukraine is still a long way off from NATO or EU membership. So what can Ukraine do to ensure its security? Well, we're here today to discuss this issue with Andreas Umland, a leading German political scientist. Andreas, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Ukraine doesn't have NATO, so what, in your opinion, are the options for better security?
Ukraine is indeed in a complicated situation because it is located, like Moldova and Georgia, in a gray zone, and it cannot hope soon to enter either NATO or the EU. And so it has to look for alternative security structures. And the only thing that comes to mind here is some sort of East European security alliance with those East European countries that are members of the EU and NATO, but still have a national interest in the stability of the Ukrainian state. There is a term for that. It's called the Intermarium, the land between the seas, which is a concept developed by Poland after World War I. When Poland was in a similar situation as Ukraine today, it was also in a geopolitical gray zone.
So what countries then do you think should be involved in this modern intermarium?
Well, the countries, first of all, that need actually protection, and these are the countries in the gray zone, which I already mentioned, Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. And the countries that supposedly would have an interest, for instance, and above all, in the stability of Ukraine, namely the neighboring countries of Ukraine, which are Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and Romania. There would be other countries like the Baltic countries, perhaps other Balkan countries as well, that may have an interest to join such a security alliance because they would be also interested in stability in especially Ukraine.
And, well, what kind of security would this alliance provide for its members? Would it be just military, or what other type of security are you considering?
That's a complicated question as well, because obviously the countries that are already in NATO, they cannot provide security guarantees that would conflict with their obligations towards NATO. So we would be talking about something that would be below the Article 5 of the Washington Treaty of NATO, but could still involve help for Ukraine, especially in the development of its military technological industry, in terms of security, information, critical intelligence, and so on, and that would signal to Russia that Russia would, if it escalates further the conflict in Ukraine, it would enter a larger conflict, not just with Ukraine, but also with other countries that would provide support in one way or another with Ukraine. We have a model for this. This is the strategic partnership treaty between Turkey and Azerbaijan from 2010, where the NATO member country, Turkey, gave security assurances to Azerbaijan, an Eastern Partnership country like Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. And Turkey did that, although it has also obligations towards NATO.
And so how willing do you think these countries would be to enter such an alliance?
I think they should be willing. Currently, I think many experts and politicians, diplomats in the East European NATO member countries, they have a sort of astronomical view of Eastern Europe. They see Eastern Europe as being divided in two planets, in the EU and NATO planet, and the planet with the rest of Eastern Europe. And they are on the right planet, and I think they've therefore solved their security issues. But obviously, neither the EU nor NATO can solve all of the security issues for Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania, especially if, for instance, the Ukrainian state collapses under a Russian assault, a hybrid war assault. So they should have a national interest in providing more security to Ukraine, not only out of friendship and sympathy and empathy and historical ties, but also out of their own existential core national interests.
So how realistic do you see this being? We've seen other similar type of alliances fail. So what are your thoughts about the realism of this actually going into effect?
Currently, it is certainly a long shot. It is an idea that is discussed, but it is far from implementation so far. There are also different ideas about the Intermarium. Some people see it as an anti-German concept or as some sort of alternative civilizational concept. I think that is all not necessary. But security for the gray zone is necessary, and it's actually surprising that this is not being taken more seriously so far, because I think the countries on the eastern border of the EU and NATO should have an elementary interest in providing security, and therefore I think sooner or later there will be a serious discussion about that.
And we also see that the NATO and that the U.S. and other countries are reluctant to support Ukraine, as we see with the failure of the Budapest Memorandum. So how much support do you think, or actual military support, as you said, it's not quite possible, but how effective could, in your opinion, this alliance be?
I think Ukraine would actually get support from the West, whether it's the European Union or NATO, the US, Canada, anyway, if it would go into a larger conflict with Russia. The problem now is that there are no clear signals towards Russia about such support, and an EU and NATO membership is not possible. And therefore, one has to look for other options to provide such a signal to not only the Russian leaders, but even, I would say, to the Russian population, that if Russia gets into a conflict with Ukraine again, or if it extends the current conflict to a larger war, for instance, towards creating a land corridor between the Donetsk basin and Crimea, that would mean a larger conflict with a group of countries and not only with Ukraine. I think that would happen anyway, but currently there's no international structure that actually signals to Russia, to the Russian leadership, that it would be in for a rather large conflict if it attacks Ukraine further.
Absolutely. We can see that today. So what do you think then would be the effect on Russia? Would Russia see this as a credible threat? Would it become more aggressive if such an alliance was created?
In a way, the East European alliance is maybe even a good solution in as far as it would not involve actually militarily very potent powers and no nuclear superpower. It would be an alliance where each of the states is actually militarily relatively weak, but where the sum of the states and the sum of these countries would be a more credible threat towards Russia than currently not threat, but deterrence towards Russia than currently Ukraine is by itself. I think it wouldn't be really a threat to Russia because these are militarily not strong powers, but it would be still a different situation than currently. And we know that the current situation, the current gray zone situation in Eastern Europe is unstable. We know that from the past. And if that is continued in the future, it's not difficult to project and to predict that there will be more instability. And perhaps such a structure could at least reduce instability in Eastern Europe, although it would not be a final solution for the security question of Ukraine. That would only be NATO membership.
It could be, in a sense, a stop point for temporary support and mutual alliance.
Yes, it would be certainly not something comparable to NATO. It would be a much weaker alliance in terms of both the countries involved and the obligations that the countries take upon themselves, but it would be still better than the current situation.
And is there some other type of security that this alliance will be able to provide? For example, maybe security against cyber attacks?
Yes, I mean, that would be one of the fields where these countries could cooperate. And there are actually some fields like cyber where not just the countries in the gray zone, Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine are in a conflict with Russia, but where already all the countries of the presumed Intermarium are already in some sort of conflict with Russia. And cyber trade or security intelligence operations are happening not only in Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, but also in other countries. And therefore, I think such an alliance is in a way quite natural.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Andreas, for being with us today. Today, we were speaking with Dr. Andreas Umland, a leading German political scientist, about creating a new defense pact to ensure Ukraine's security. You've been watching Head to Head with Vivica Williams. Thank you.